One, 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 little volume. Yeah, 1, 2. That's better. Okay, good. Howdy, y'all. Wayne understands what I just said. There may be a few others that understand it. But anyway, this session, let me say, it's very impromptu. When Dana saw that we were doing the session on the modules, Dana called me and said, I want you to do something on, actually he wanted me to show how I did my modules or how I used them off my computer at that session. We decided that was not the place to do it. And so Dana set this up very hurriedly. And so Vic and of course, when he asked me, I thought, who better to ask to help out with this or to take charge than Vic Ceder? Take charge. Yeah, did I not tell you that? You didn't read the fine print. But anyway, thank you guys for coming. We didn't know what to expect. So anyway, we're glad y'all are here, and we're glad to be here with you. So anyway, I think what Dana had in mind was that just like one of the topics that we talked about over in the other room a while ago, the other discussions on the modules, is you just get so darn many of them, they start running together. You can't remember them all. And the older I get, the fewer I remember. So right now I'm at a point to where I'm glad they didn't ask me for a module to get out on that one deal in there. But you got it? I thought what we might do, what Dana had in mind, was for us to share some of the ways that we manage our modules. And I think probably most everyone in here, I'm assuming, is probably using computers by now, I assume. So, it's not, we've surpassed, or we've gotten past the 5x8 index card age, at least. So anyway, we'll go from there. Anyway, what we're going to do, we're trying to get the computer hooked up where we can kind of show you some of the things I do. And Vic, the way he manages his. Which program do you use, Vic? He said to ad-lib, so I mean, while they're getting all this hooked up, the first time I ever saw anyone use a computer at a dance was Vic, and it was in San Antonio at that. What was that? The old. We did a weekend there a couple of years. The old. Holy cow! An old. Yeah, it was a golf resort that had probably been condemned a few years earlier, and I kept watching this guy run back and forth to the halls with nothing but his laptop in hand, and here the rest of us were running back and forth with a briefcase that weighed 14 pounds and microphones. Thank you. And so needless to say, I was quite impressed. And then I was asked one time in South Texas, this has probably been close to 25 years ago, the Chamber of Commerce, we used to work hand in hand with the Chamber of Commerce, and the Chamber of Commerce, the guy at the Tourist Bureau called me and he said, I have a person here from some computer magazine that's wanting to write an article on how computers have changed square dancing. And I'm like, I don't even own a computer, so I'm not the guy to talk to. And all I could think of was remembering Vic running back and forth hall to hall with his laptop. And so I told him, I just fessed up and I said, well, none of us down here are really doing that yet, but I do know a guy who can tell you probably a lot about that. I don't know if they ever got in touch with you, but anyway, that's neither here nor there. So what we're going to try to do is show you how we kind of manage our modules, because like I say, there's no way you can remember all these things. It's unreal. I know what program you're going to probably pull up. So I'm going to pull up a different one. I'm assuming most everybody probably uses Square View. Good, because I don't know a thing about it. I was one of Dave Wilson's beta testers for SQMP3, and so I have just, I'm of the old opinion, if it's not broke, don't fix it. And so I've stuck with that. And I'm just going to, one of the things that I've always done, I think we can see all that, I keep a folder on mine. I've just got SDHTML files. And what I do, I write these are just a few of the little files that I use, like we were talking about in the session earlier, and I think it was Randy that mentioned he really looks for get outs. And that's what I look for, is get outs. I always want something, a unique get out. Sometimes, certainly I'm looking for different get ins, but I'm more of a get out guy. And I'm just going to, for example, let's see, I'm going to open up my music player, and I toggle between Vic's program and Dave's music player, and I'll use Vic's for these things, and I'll use Dave's for the music and sometimes something else. But I will a lot of times just open up a file, and I'll come down and let's say I just want, special get outs. This will bring up special get outs, and I will toggle between this screen and my music just by using the function keys. F11 will take me back to my music. And now I understand that Square View is getting, I know it's getting to be more and more like SQMP3 because Dave has turned over to Thomas a lot of his technology. That's what I've been told anyway. So maybe this will help a little bit if you do use the Square View. But I will set a lot of my modules up in tabs. I've got that one right there that says special get outs. And then I might want another one that, let's see what I've got here. Let's say, okay, here's one, Dixie Grand get outs. I'll have one set up for different ones, and I can string across a lot of tabs. And so as I'm, calling, I've obviously picked out my piece of music. And then when I get to the point that I want to start using my modules, I'll just tab over to that screen, and then I can jump back and forth between whatever modules I want to use. And it works for me. If it worked for that, 99% of the modules that I have and use, I would probably not be able to use them at a dance because I can't remember them. And I know Vic will use, and in fact, like I said, this is just what I do with SQMP3, but then I use his program also, and I do basically the same thing. So a lot of times I'm toggling way back and forth, and if I could ever learn everything there is to learn about the one program, maybe I could just narrow it down to one. But anyway, that's what I try to do.
Well, I arrange my modules or sequences I can arrange them by level, by what type of module they are, like starting from 0 lines or 0 box, by level of difficulty. I keep singing calls in one setup. I keep get outs in another, stir the bucket routines, whatever. So however you want to put your material together is up to you. You can make a workshop, module workshop calls or whatever you want to do. Can I try to hook my thing up here?
Yeah, sure.
Just pull it out and hold on to this.
I do the same thing that Vic does. I have them all by level. I have them by my formations. For example, I'll have 0 box get outs, 0 line get outs. I'll have across the street boxes set up, all kinds of different setups, and then even to a degree the difficulty. So you're in the big time.
Wow, look at that. Never hooked that up before. Maybe I can make my window smaller, maybe. Well, you're getting all the side things hidden here.
If you haven't noticed, this is completely unrehearsed. Like I said, we didn't even know we were going to do this until about a week ago, and we were both out.
All right, this is my program, of course. And this is, yes, I have a program. This is my program that Darryl sometimes uses when he's in a good mood. So this is a dance. This is the Bakersfield Fiesta Mainstream Hall that we did a couple of weeks ago. And although I probably site-called most of that, I had modules prepared here. We're right now looking at the singing call module here. So there's a standard singing call here. I can toggle between them, seeing what I want. If I want to find a specific, we're looking here in the main pink window, right? So there's a singing call figure right there. How did I get there? Well, okay. Yeah. Okay. I have a function in my program where I can go and make a list of all the. Let me start over. All of my figures or modules are stored in what I call databases. So it's just a database that has a bunch of these things in it. And I go into a section here and I tell it which modules I want inside each one of these frames. So we're looking at right now frame F5 in the main screen. You'll see in the upper left-hand corner it says F5 SCS for singing call sequences. And it says I'm looking at number 6 out of 82. So there's actually 82 sequences in this file, which I can go quickly back and forth looking for whatever I want while I'm calling. So while I'm calling, if I want to workshop a figure, I would do a search function, and I might want to find, we'll look for veer left, for example. And it'll show me the next module that's in there that has a veer left. And if I don't like that one, I can, hit a different key here. N. All right. So here's another singing call figure with a veer left in it. So I've got a search function. So when I'm calling, if I'm workshopping veer left, I can go and find it in the next sequence quickly. And so while I'm doing the tagline of the singing call, I can hit a couple keys here and then find another one that might be appropriate. Or of course I could use the same one again. I've also got this one. I've got it arranged by this set of sequences here was I just called in Sweden and I called something called basic 40. So I was limited to the first 40 calls. And so I'd written a few sequences because I'm not used to calling basic 40. I'm used to calling basic whatever, 50 something. So there's a few calls like past the ocean that might not be in there. Then I've got some standard mainstream figures here, some asymmetrics that I call. I've got the stir the bucket routine here. And a few other things. I have 0 lines, things starting from 0 lines, 0 boxes, and F6 was a bunch of short opening biggie sequences. So I put all my short sequences together because I can use those at the beginning of the tip or at the end of the tip as a quick little, whoa, look at that, cool. You've got a right and left grand or whatever. And then I also happen to have any specialty things like this is a kaleidoscope sequence. So I do other things like kaleidoscopes and 6-couple rectangle kind of sequences also. So I keep those all involved just in case I have to call one of those. The database on these are the online database, which anybody can get to. It's www.ceder.net/ChorioDB. There's several thousand sequences and modules and everything you can all download for free. You can search for specific calls at specific levels and check it out if you haven't checked it out. People can add sequences to that, share with others. But be forewarned that I will proofread them and validate them, and if there's something in there I don't like or don't agree with, it won't be in there. Or if it's too esoteric for the general population, I'll get rid of it. Yeah, there's a few in there that are not proofread. This is my program right here. It cannot proofread kaleidoscope squares properly yet, but this sequence does work. Yes. Would you like to get on the mic?
Valerie Patterson, Campbell, California. When you proofread the things you have on your website, do you look at flow also?
Well, there's thousands of things up there. Okay. Um, Certainly all these things that I submit or put in, I check for flow. I look at the sequence when it comes in general, and, I'm looking for things like flow, overflow, same hand used twice in a row, all that kind of stuff. Because I have a program that automatically proofreads everything, the same program here. But I actually go in, I will set the difficulty level, because I don't necessarily believe that somebody in Europe who's used to calling to people who can dance APD anything, what their idea of easy might be our idea of hard. Okay, so I'll go in and I will make sure that the level of the difficulty looks good. By doing that, I mentally go through and scan, and I will usually catch all of the flow issues, but I can't guarantee it. And certainly if you have an issue with any of those sequences, send me a message, because each one of those sequences has a unique ID number, and I can go and edit it, delete it, change it, whatever.
Larry Clark, Kennewick, Washington. Is there a limit to the number of frames we can use when we build a dance, or is it just 10? Or
He's referring to the number of frames, which is the number of piles of sequences that are here. It is currently limited at 10. I have plans to change that to update that to more.
I'm not, here to advocate any programs or anything, but I do use Vic's program a lot, and more than I let him think. But the thing that I really appreciate about Vic's program is how I can write my material in what I call square dance language. I don't have to trick it into, saying, I don't want to. Well, I don't have to just sit there and start making out term after term after term to get it to do one call that I want them to do. And the not proof that you were talking about, you mentioned that. I do a lot of that myself too. I look at Vic's screen and I'm looking at my screen, and we're both looking at sequences that say not proofed, but we ourselves proofed them out, and we're totally satisfied with them. And the thing that I like about it, for example, I have up right now on my screen a plus dance, and I'm on special get outs, and it also, not only does it say this has not been proofed, it also says warning, there's a press ahead in here, a C1 call. Well, I know I'm not going to use that call, but it gives me that warning, and I know to be on the lookout for it. And when that comes up, I'm going to use boys step ahead and take that girl by the hand in front of you, something like that. But you said yours will do 10 frames at a time. I'm not sure what Dave's SQMP3 will do. I know I've rattled off some where there'd be 3 lines of tabs, and I just go from tab to tab on whatever I was wanting to do. Think it's what? Yeah.
Well, that's just the difference between using Chrome HTML. You can tab everything versus the frames. I'm a fan of the frames, so.
Well, obviously you don't have to use a program at all to do this. Like, if they're in HTML files, you just open up all the HTML files that are up there, and down at the bottom of your screen you have all the little tab controls that you can select whatever file you want. And if you name them so that you can easily tell what's in there, you can bring them up quickly. The one advantage, or like to my program here, is if you actually call one of those sequences, you can hit a button and it'll move it into a used pile so that you don't reuse it again. And I will typically take one of these dances, which is like this, And like I have a Monday night group, a Tuesday night group, and whatever. In the Tuesday night group, I'll call something, and then I'll hit the use button, and then I don't have to call that again for several more weeks or until I put that sequence back into the file. That way you can keep your material fresh and don't repeat yourself.
And I know Vic made the comment just a while ago, you don't necessarily have to have a program to write your material with to do these things. Lots of times I will take modules that I have known through the years to be really great modules, and I'll just have them on a Word document maybe. And then I'll have that Word document. I'll open up all the different material that I might want to use that night. In fact, I may be in the middle of calling a dance, and all of a sudden I think, wow, you know what? This group would really like these figures. They would really enjoy this. They can handle it. And so I might just pull up a Word document, and it's got the sequences. And it's not necessarily the sequences. I'm reluctantly sometimes to call them a sequence. I like to think of them more as a module because it's something short and brief. Because, I've always thought, you can ad-lib all you want to, just sight calling to them. And then you want your get out to be really snappy. That's what I like to think of. But you don't necessarily have to have a program to write the material. There's so many different ways of storing it and accessing it, in the course of a dance. It does take a little sometimes getting used to toggling between screens, but it's just like anything else, In the old days, you learned at a certain time to reach down there and reset your record needle, But is there anybody got any particular questions you'd like to ask?
Dennis Clark, Indianapolis, Indiana. I'm just going to ask, I have had SQMP3 Gold for years also. Just in the last couple of years, started using Vic's software when I went into the advanced level, or advanced program, excuse me. I'm going to ask if both of you would mind going through the software that you're using and show how to build these modules, just a very short module, and just show the user interface and how we go through building that module and putting it into the software that you use.
Okay, so in my program, what you would do is you'd say sequence. You go to the sequence menu item, select new, and it pulls up a screen that lets you select where you want to put this sequence. And I group them by different levels and types of sequences. Right now, I'll select the 0 box. This is being a temporary database. And my program brings up this. Okay, so it's got a 0 box over here in the left-hand big area there. And down in the lower, it's in the big right area. And then the lower left is something, it says the edit buffer. And this section, I type in what I want them to do. Okay, so we're in a 0 box, I can type in swing through. Okay, and then you'll notice there's a before picture in the upper portion, and then there's the after picture. So it's just moved them from a snapshot from one position to the next position. I don't know what SQ does, but
Michael Fetting, Angier, North Carolina. There's another program called SQ. It has that same similarity where you go in there and it's already listed and you do heads and you click it and you get your description. That looks a lot similar. Didn't I say SD? I was testing you. You passed.
okay. Okay. Let me pull up a different thing here for a moment. That's not going to work. Need to. So I have an area where you can actually pull up some calls to do here. I've got A2 set up, so it's not going to have all the plus calls or whatever. Looking for, get rid of this.
There's lots of software out there. SD is one. Vic's got his. There's what's the one? CALLERLABs. What is Colorama? There's a lot of software out there, and of course, I think a lot of it is what you get used to. That's the way I am. Once I get accustomed to something, I don't want to change. I don't want to have to relearn.
Yeah, the Colorama guys in the vendors area. One thing about what Darryl just said is that there's actually some people that get 2 or 3 of the programs because they make you write differently. Okay, so if you're writing with SD all the time, you're in a certain mindset. Where if you're writing with something that's maybe more graphical oriented like this, you might be different. So I can actually go over here and select the call and double click on it, and it'll execute it. Like we just did a linear cycle. I can go in here. I can type like LTB for load the boat. Quick way to do it, and it will resolve that and do the load the boat. So you can put in abbreviations and what have you. When you're ready to resolve, you would hit another set of buttons. And then it will give you a list of resolves here from this formation, and maybe spin the top, explode, and element left might be a good one. It's okay. Then it did the resolve, and then this is automatically saved right now in this database called OneBoxTemp, and it's a sequence number 468 in that database.
When Vic hit the resolve button, you notice how it resolved them all across from home. A lot of times what I'll do is when I get to a point and I'm like, okay, it's time to resolve. Now, we're talking a sequence now maybe, or it could be a module. I'll look for something that I want it to put them at home. And so I'll just start scrolling through there, and when I see something that puts them at home, I'm like, oh, let's check it out. If I like it, I may use it. If I don't, I'll keep going. You'll find all sorts of, like this resolve right here. You could take and add another little small module to that would put them at home. So it's endless. Any questions? Scott, you want to say something, I can tell.
So my name is Janet Shen, and I'm now here in Tempe, Arizona. You've used modules and sequences. Could you define for me to make sure I'm on the same train of thought? I've heard them used synonymously, and I've heard them used not synonymously. So please advise us which way you're talking.
In my opinion, a sequence is, they could be somewhat synonymous. In my opinion, a sequence actually has a resolve on it, where a module could just be any group of calls. Touch a quarter, scoot back, boys, run, something like that. That can be a little module that is already equivalent to, that's equivalent to star through, for example. And a sequence to me is usually something that it can start from a 0 box, 0 line, or home, and then resolves to a right, left, grand, or an element left.
Yeah. To me, I agree with Vic. The sequence is starting it from the squared set, and however you want to set up, your get in wherever you want them, and then dance them along. My rule of thumb, if I'm writing a sequence, my rule of thumb is I start looking for a get out after 10 calls. I think that's when yours kicks in. That's the default on Vic's. His default's at 10 calls, and then it'll say after, say, you've written 10 calls, it'll say there are 3,931 possible get outs from this position. Maybe not that many. But it'll say that, there's this many get outs from where you're at that particular level. And I know SD, I think, will do sort of the same thing in a way, and you can scroll through those as well. The other software, I'm not really that familiar. Well, I don't know. I have no clue how it works. But these are just, it's just so simple. It's once you get the knack for it, and it really makes you start thinking outside the box, I think. and that's why I like using it. And the same with the modules. I like to take a call. I might theme a call. A friend of mine called me here a while back and was talking about Crossfire, and he says, let's try to find some really neat get outs for Crossfire. And so I'm like, well, okay, So I sat down, started playing. He played, and we compared notes, and came up with some really keen ideas. And in fact, I just did a singing call for ESP, and my singing call figure is head square through 4, swing through, girl full, peel the top, right to left through, no big deal, past the ocean. And then at that point, I use Crossfire. It's going to be a crash, but it's swing and promenade. And, I thought I may catch flack for it because there'll be people who say, oh, yeah, that's not legal. You can't do that. But what the heck, the dancers danced it, and it raised a few eyebrows, and they're like, oh, wow, that's kind of neat, And so, just things like that. It makes you start thinking outside of the box a little bit. Anybody else got any? Yes.
You had, again, Michael Fetting with Anchor, North Carolina. You had mentioned Colorama, and Reinhold did not pay me to say anything, but I did get, and I've had it since 2013. And there are two features that I really love about it is it's that you can get into a three-dimensional graphic to where you can see instead of just a circular, you can go back and forth. Plus, it's voice activated, so that if you want to speak into the mic and tell them what to do, it'll do it. And so you can go in there and say heads, and then heads will pop up in the text, and it says square through 4, and then the figures will move, and then you can go in and do what you want to swing through, boys run. You can just speak it so that you're actually kind of calling to the program. And I've had some flack on it that I really need to get back into the checkers because I'm a relatively young caller anyway, so that I can get more of a hands-on approach on feeling the figure. But in regards to a computer program, I just found myself just roped into Colorama.
I'm a very strong believer that you should push checkers. It shows you what the dancer's going through. If you call something really hard, it's going to be a hard time for you to push the checkers through it, so you'll know it's hard. It makes you learn what the calls are. It makes you know what you start, because you a spin chain exchange the gears, like that's an annoyance to push through all the time. So you actually start learning what that actually does to checkers. You go, oh, you just do this, and or relay the deuce. You put your hand down and turn it all checkers halfway. So you actually learn what these calls do. You learn the flow. You can tell when you're doing something that doesn't quite look right because you've just done this, and it's like, oops, well, can't do that. So I think pushing checkers is you should do that definitely.
I'll echo that. If I were going to be sitting here right now and actually writing material for a dance, my checkers would be right here. And, I think every one of us has an idea. We know certain calls, how they're going to flow, how it's going to feel for the dancers. We know what to expect. But we get into some, if you totally depend on the computer, you'll get into situations where you may write, it can be the neatest sequence. Oh, looky there, we got checkers. Mine are in the room. You can have the neatest sequence in the world, but if the dancers can't dance it, it's not worth the paper, that it's written on. And, yes.
Silicon Valley. I sort of use a hybrid approach. I don't actually use physical checkers at all, but I write all my choreography in my head. And if I can't keep track of it in my own head, then I know it's way too complicated. And I just use a computer program, SD, to check the choreography that I've already written down.
And wouldn't it be neat if we could take the features from one program and the features from another program and the features we like from another program and have one really super program, And but that's in the perfect world. But the checkers, you can't replace them.
Brad Caldwell, Georgetown, Texas. Darryl, in the previous session when we were talking about modules, we were talking about reverse engineering, kind of, from using a particular call to get to the get out that we wanted to do. Can you tell us how you might approach that using one of these?
You're definitely going to get your exercise in for the day. When I was talking about that writing in reverse order, and Randy, I bet you've done a lot of that yourself too, haven't you? Taken what you want, know what you want, and it's here's where I want to be, and what have I got to do to get there? And I know I always find myself, that's when I go back to the checkers. I get my checkers, set them up where I want them, and then I'm like, okay, I want to go, let's just say a quick get out from a zero line to a right and left grand, okay? And I know what call I want to use, and I know what formation I'm looking for. And I'll start there, and then I just start working the dolls. Okay, I've got to get them into this resolve. What have I got to do just using a few calls to get them there? And I will work backwards with the dolls. So like, okay, boy, I wish I could make my brain work in reverse order, but that would be so neat. But that's what I was referring to. And yeah, I don't know of any program that you can write in reverse order with.
Michael Maltonfort from Chicago. I actually used Vic's program to reverse engineer get-outs because Vic's program lets you add in calls that aren't part of his database. So I think you have the concept which means do it backwards. So what I did was I put in unpass through or uncrossfire, and so that lets me reverse engineer these things. He's making a face. The reason it gets a little complicated because, for instance, if you want facing lines, you can unrecycle two ways. One's from a left-hand side, one's from a left. So but it works really well, and I can reverse engineer a lot of get-outs that way. So.
Let me kind of show you what I do here. If I want, so suppose I want to do a crossfire to a right and left grand. Okay, what I would do is I would set these checkers up to some formation, like heads square through 4, veer left. Excuse me. Veer left. I'm just typing in some calls here. Then crossfire. Okay, this is not a right and left grand. So what I would do here is I would look at this thing and say, oh, well, I need the boys in the middle and the girls in the end. So then I'd go back to the sequence somewhere and I'd say, well, look, I got the side boy and the head girl. They need to switch places. So I'd go back in the sequence somewhere and I would say, yeah, I'm just going to type in some challenge command here. I'm going to make it so the boys are leaders and the girls are trailers in this setup. Oops, that didn't work. Hold on, okay. Slip. So, I don't know if this is a great example, though. Let's see. Oh, we're getting close here. So I just need the head ladies to trade here. Heads left wheel through. Okay, so I've got them do a right and left grand eventually. And so what I'll do is I'll go back here and I'll undo a few calls. Then I have a button, and this might not be a great example, button that says find me a get in from here. Maybe it'll find me one. No, it's all challenge stuff. Not a good plan. What's that? Well, this might not be a good example. But basically what I was trying to do was I would set up the ending formation, then go back and tweak the beginning thing, adding all sorts of garbage calls, which I was good at that part. And then there's a feature that says in the program, it says find a get in from here. And I would do that, and then I would basically replace all the gobbledygook at the beginning with this get in that would be preferably at the level that I'm trying to call at, and then to the resolve that I wanted. So it's somewhat of a trick the program into going down the line and with all these gobbly calls, and then say replace this whole mess with something from that you know. Chris Jensen.
Okay, Chris Jensen, Albuquerque, New Mexico. SD, for those of you who use that, and I have been starting to use both of them occasionally. SD has the reconcile function, where you get to a place and you've just done a cool call, and it's like they're in waves, but you'd like to do a right and left grand. You can then go into reconcile, move the pointer up to a place, and ask SD to insert calls that will then bring you to that get out down further. And, of course, you have to evaluate those calls very carefully because they are not always calls that you would really want to use. But you can just keep saying, find another, find another, find another, and it will find some interesting things.
Scott Pierce from Folsom, California, or Canfield, Ohio, if you believe my badge. First, a comment talking about the reverse engineering. If you're pushing checkers, one of the things that I have found that works real well for me is have a double set of checkers. Set up the second set of checkers in the resolve that you want to find, and then it makes it a lot easier to work backwards with the other set of checkers to get to that point. My question is for Vic. When you start doing not asymmetrical, but maybe non-standard choreography, for example, if you had lines of four, same-sex lines of four facing out, you wanted the girls to do one thing while the boys do something else. How difficult or easy is it to do that with your program?
It's very easy. You just say boys wheel and deal, girls tag the line, it'll do it.
I have a question for both of you. Randy Doherty, Texas and Arizona, and most foreign countries. When you guys are calling along and you're looking for a get out and you're going through, and I'm wondering how much of that do you do as in comparison to actually having it already up here in your head as a memory module? The last time I went to Darryl's dance, he called a left Dixie Grand 2/3 and Alaman left. Now, no. Well, if it was, I re-engineer it, and I know if I'm chicken plucker and I do the right and left through, I know I'm there at that setup. It's nothing more than like remember doing the square through 2 and trade by to the corner. Feels like that. Only you're starting with the left with the right hand lady pulling by, and then right to your partner. That's the 2/3 of the Dixie Grand, and then Alaman left, I think, is the way that you put it together. Yeah. You said left Dixie Grand 2/3, which, first of all, I started thinking, I didn't know that had thirds. But when you start looking at the definition and everything. Anyway, I'm wondering, did you do that from your brain, or were you going down and all of those things were written up on your computer? Because when I'm calling, my fingers are so big, I can't hit the right buttons to find the right get out that I want to use. So that's my question. Was it already up there in your head, or did you see it on the screen?
Probably the answer to your question is yes to both of the above. Probably it was something that I knew I wanted to use. Something during that tip had probably triggered a thought in my mind, and I thought, ooh, I either have or I think I can come up with a real quick get out. And sometimes it's a get out that I know I've already written up maybe. Sometimes it's something that you just see on the floor. That particular instance, I don't know. But I would guess something triggered a thought when I was watching the dancers dance. And then either I saw it and, it's something I'd run into before, or it's something that I knew I had documented in my get outs. And while we were talking about the get outs and all, I hope we answered your question. I'll let Vic answer your question too.
I just basically see it. I've pushed checkers for so long, for so many years. I know what all the calls do, and also I kind of have an innate feeling on calls that I don't really know what they do. I kind of know what they do in terms of changing the sexes around and keeping or not sequence or not. And I just call that and then see what happens. I know I'm close, and I just call this call, and it's like, oh, look at that. There's a right and left grand, or it just pops up. It's something like that. But it's because I pushed checkers for years and years and years, and I know what everything does.
Yeah, and I have to ditto those thoughts too, because nothing can replace pushing the checkers. And Randy, I think, will testify to this too. Like in our case, we're calling a lot in the winter times, and a lot of times I find myself using the dancers as my checkers at a dance. I may not have time that particular morning to work up whatever I'm wanting to achieve that day. And so when I get to the dance, I may think, okay, this is what I want to do now. Okay, I don't tell the dancers this, but they are my checkers there. This tip I'll be making middle notes, and the next tip, okay, if I do this, and then by the third tip, I'm like, there's what I'm looking for right there, And so anyway, now, and back to what Brad was talking about on the reverse engineering, this was just a little sequence. I used the example of talking about crossfire, and you were talking about the crossfire to a right or left grand. And someone had asked me that question, said, let's find a good get out from a crossfire to a right or left grand. And so I kept thinking about it, and I thought, holy cow, crossfire from the way we're going to be using it is probably not going to take you necessarily. It's going to, to the right and left grand you want. So I started trying to think out of the box, and I thought it's going to probably involve a crash somewhere. And in order to do that, you're going to have to do it from an ocean wave. And so I thought, okay, I want a quick zero line get out using a crossfire to a right and left ground. And so obviously, here's my heads lead right. There's the line, and then by pushing the checkers backwards, a few calls, I thought, this is going to be a piece of cake. And so I found that all I had to do was right or left through, pass the ocean, girl trade, swing through, and then at that point, I said, don't think about it, do it, crossfire to a right or left grand. And the whole floor did it, and they're in the process of doing the grand, and they're scratching their head, and they're looking all around. Now, it was probably an advanced dance first. And they're thinking, did I just do a crossfire from an ocean wave? I couldn't have. You can't do that. And so that's back to yours, the reverse engineering. And that's how, there it is right there. And then, I lost there's the crash, and then, obviously the resolve. Now that particular from the perfect zero line is not going to put you back at home. But, you can just tell from looking right there, well, if I get them, across the set, they're going to be close enough. Any other questions? Ladies. I'm just curious, how many do use computer software in your choreography to some degree, to whatever? It's obviously something, the one thing that I think everyone has to really be careful about is we talked about this flow, overflow, and is it really practical? It's so easy to write a sequence here, and then you get out on the floor and try to call it, and it's like, ooh, I should not have done that. But yes.
Valerie Patterson, Campbell, California. I went to 2 scholar schools a little over a week apart. One of them dealt with, what was it called? Something followed by partner trade. walk and dodge and partner trade. And the next one says, oh, you can't do that. And I'm saying, oh, the year before I attended 2 caller schools 2 months apart, and it was 0 boxes and 0 lines, or I don't know. The terminology changed within that short period of time. Often we hear, you can't do that, it's bad flow. How come it's always bad flow for the guys when you drill us into the ground?
I don't know that I'm going to answer your question directly, but you used the walk and dodge and the partner trade as an example, and that's a call that probably in the last couple of years I have seen everyone, really, callers just cringe if another caller calls it. And I got to thinking about that, and how many of us use the call right and left through? Think about the man's part. You're going forward and then immediately backing right out of it again. I'm like, so, what's the big deal,
Hey, my name's Rob Crum from Spokane, and if you want to find out about how it flows, dance both parts, and that'll tell you. That's all you got to do. You can play with your computer until hell freezes over, but just dance both parts to the music, to the beat, and that'll answer all your questions.
Oz, Silicon Valley. I'll just add a little extra bit about the flow thing because I'm a contra dancer more than a square dancer in a lot of ways. When you know what's coming, as in the example of the right and left through, you can have your body set with the muscle memory to make it all flowing well. It's when your body suddenly wants to jump in a different direction from what you're expecting, that's what makes poor flow in a lot of cases. Not necessarily bad flow, because that's more like, when you're having the boys bend the line and the boys have to move forward and back. That's bad flow. But in a lot of cases, say, walk and dodge, boys trade. That's good flow if they're expecting it. But if they're not expecting it, it's going to be a lot more difficult.
Brad Caldwell, Georgetown, Texas. I was just going to say, I sometimes think that we get overly concerned about micromanaging flow, and I say that because we train our dancers in our calling to be prepared for certain sequences. A right and left through is something that we teach them, that if you look on a micro level at the call is bad flow, but we teach the call and they're prepared for the call, as Oz was saying. And in dancing, particularly those of you who round dance know this, there are what are called checking movements, so that you're stopping knowing you're going to change direction. So a lot of what becomes bad flow, in my opinion, because of delivery, the timing of the delivery by the caller. If the dancer is warned early enough, then a dodge to a partner trade isn't bad because they already know, oh, I'm shifting right back over. And so they can make that checking motion. Another example would be right and left through, veer left, and right and left through, veer right. Are either one of them bad flow? Not if delivered correctly, because you adjust. No, veer right isn't bad flow. You adjust where the center of the turn is by having the timing ahead so that the dancers are prepared.
I know what I was going to say. When I was talking about that little crossfire figure to the right, left, grand, and when I said I made the comment to the dancers, don't think about it, do it. I said that for two reasons. One reason, I wanted them not to think about it. I wanted them to do it. And the other reason was I wanted to just have that split second of extra time in there after they had done the swing through, and then the centers would be trading again. I just wanted to, kind of break that up a little bit. But we do that all the time anyway, swing through, centers trade, So there's just, but I like what you're saying about the flow on that, I don't know that we answered your question, really. That was, I think, would you call that a loaded question, Vic? Sort of. And, like I said, I'm certainly not up here advocating anyone's software. I don't think Vic's trying to do a sales pitch on you guys by no means either. There's a lot of good programs out there. And we were, like I said, I was asked specifically just to show, to try to demonstrate how we manage our modules, hence, how we manage our sequences, modules, how we manage our material as we use it. And it does, when you work off of a computer, it does take a little getting used to, especially if you start toggling between screens. You can very easily hit the wrong button, and then you're like, uh-oh, what now? So. But does anyone have anything they'd like to add to, or any? Yes.
Nikki Hensley, Bay Area, California. Just as an addition to these programs that we use, SD, CALLERLAB, Taminations has helped me an awful lot in that it makes me go to my checkers too, because I will look at something and go, oh, okay, because obviously the colors of my checkers are different than the colors of, and they'll have everybody in a certain sequence, whereas if I'm coming from another call, I wouldn't have it in that sequence. So that's when I use my checkers, and that's really helpful.
Dennis Clark, Indianapolis, Indiana. I'm going to echo what you were saying, Darryl, a little bit, but expand on it. There are a lot of different programs and applications out now to manage what we're doing. I have been told, I don't know how many times, that I was nuts for paying for SQMP3 when SquareView was out there for free. I have SquareView. I used it for a while. I went back to what I knew. I have friends that use SquareView, and they swear by it. I use it predominantly. I also have had Colorama since version 1. I think I was one of the first owners of that, and it has been a fantastic program for me for the lower level, for the lower programs. I say lower, but I mean for basic, mainstream, and plus. When I started calling advanced, I had problems getting it to do certain things, so I had to find something else, and it was recommended to me that I get Vic's program, and it fit perfectly into the advanced program. And I'm very happy that I did that. And it also helped me in being when the advanced program, I have to use cue cards to be able to call it, because my memory I'm old. My memory has gotten to the point that I can't remember all that, so that I have to use the cards with. So I guess what I'm saying is, you've got a tool, we've all got toolboxes, and we have to decide which ones we're going to have in our toolbox. And there's a lot of different flavors out there and varieties, and we just need to look and see which ones fit us.
And like I said, we're not here advocating any, particular software, what have you. But I agree with what you said 100%. I started out, my first player was SQMP3. Dave asked me to be a beta tester, and I started using it, and he incorporated a lot of the functions, a lot of the things that we wanted to see it do. And so I just I've stuck with it all those times. I one time, and I'm not taking anything away from SquareView, I loaded it on my computer one time, and I finally I gave up. I thought, and that was back before a lot of the changes were made. And I have certainly not mastered Vic's music player yet, and but I love the choreography part, the material writing, and I have found it's very easy for me to organize all my material in there, whether it be by level, by formations, what have you. It's just and you can do that with so many of them. It's just that's what I got used to. That's what I'm using, But Vic, do you have anything you want to kind of a closing comment or anything?
Not really, but I just as a caller, we've got all these different tools, the software. We've got modules. We got site calling. We have the memory, the methods. Tracking in your mind, and we just need to use them all and give the dancers the best dance we can with those. Don't limit yourself to just one thing.
Just a quick show of hands. Oz from Silicon Valley again. How many of you are using a Mac to call? So there's a new program out in beta called SquareDesk that is going to be a Mac native application. And if you're interested in being a beta tester, you can get in touch with me or Mike Pogue.
Does anyone have anything they'd like to add or any other questions? Pardon? Oh, I thought like I say, this was a very impromptu session. It was in fact, I'm even surprised it got on the schedule. It was that last minute. And I'm a little surprised at how many people showed up. We really great to have you guys in here, and hope you got maybe some little something from it. I know anytime I do whether it's a caller seminar or whatever, I feel like I learn more than the people we're supposed to be there for. So I thank you guys for coming, and I think maybe we can beat them to the coffee line now. One thing, I hope you're still recording this. One thing I did fail to do at the beginning, my good friend, Mr. Vic Ceder, I appreciate you helping me out. My name's Darryl Lipscomb from Texas, and we enjoyed being with you guys.